If you try to lay up in Detroit in the late 80s, you didn't just need a game plan, you needed dental insurance. That's the temperature of today's story. Chicago versus Detroit, Jordan versus the Bad Boys, artistry versus asphalt. And the wild part? This wasn't a movie. There were no stunt doubles. By 1991, Michael Jordan had stacked a trophy case that looked like a sporting goods heist. Rookie of the Year, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, 5 straight scoring titles. He had everything except the one thing the greats wear like a crown, a championship. Between him and that ring stood a team that didn't just win, they wore you down like sandpaper. The Detroit Pistons. 2-time defending champs, blue-collar villains with a PhD in pain. You know how every great story needs a perfect foil? Chicago and Detroit felt like they were cast for the roles. On one side, Chicago, bright lights, big shoulders, media capital, a blossoming global icon in number 23. On the other, Detroit, factory grit, lunch pail pride, a city that makes engines and expects you to run hot. The Bulls wanted to fly, the Pistons wanted to make sure you never left the runway. Which version of basketball wins? The billboard or the body check? Hold that thought. Detroit builds a defense that bites. Before they became the neighborhood you don't drive through without a helmet, the Pistons were a team searching for a pulse. Enter Trader Jack McCloskey in the early 80s, a GM willing to peel off old paint to put up new steel. He moved beloved pieces, found overlooked ones, and then used the number 2 pick in 1981 on a 6'1" leader with a 6'10" will.
Isiah, coast to coast, and up and in!
Isiah Thomas. Isiah wasn't just a point guard. He was a tone. Quick, tough, ruthless in the lane. Smile that said, "Good morning," and eyes that said, "Try me." The parts kept coming. Joe Dumars, quiet as a midnight highway but cold as one too. Elite defender, late game nerve.
Feed behind him to Rodman for the dunk, and they got it!
Bill Laimbeer, a center who boxed you out then boxed you. Master of angles, elbows, and agitation.
Laimbeer will come back with an uppercut.
Rick Mahorn, more brick wall than human. Vinnie Johnson, the microwave, who could heat an arena in 2 possessions. John Sally, length and poise, and a ball of chaos named Dennis Rodman, who chased rebounds like they owed him money. Add coach Chuck Daly, tailored suits, iron principles, and the Bad Boys were fully assembled. If the NBA was a symphony, Detroit was the drumline that cracked the snare. Meanwhile, a comet lands in Chicago. 1984, the Bulls draft Michael Jordan 3rd overall after Houston takes Hakeem and Portland gambles on size. Jordan hits the league like a siren. By 87 to 88, he's doing the Marvel triple. Regular season MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, All-Star MVP, while averaging numbers that look like typos. He scores from everywhere, levitates past big men, and smothers guards on defense. If there's a problem, it's math. 1 MJ versus 5 guys with 6 fouls apiece. The Bulls can't get out of Detroit's chokehold, and the Pistons, they did their homework after Jordan torched them in a regular season game. They convened, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay, enough." The Jordan rules, aka welcome to the gauntlet. You've heard of them. You might not want to experience them. The plan was simple to say, brutal to live. Build a maze made of human bodies, keep Jordan out of the air, crowd his space, vary the looks, send him into help, make him feel like a forearm before he feels a rhythm. If he turns the corner, foul with purpose. If he elevates, make sure he lands with questions. Dumars took the primary assignment. Textbook feat, discipline St. Augustine would love. While Rodman shadowed, swatted, and supplied static.
There's the horn, overtime!
Laimbeer and Mahorn patrolled the lane like bouncers checking IDs. It wasn't subtle, but subtlety doesn't win bar fights. And here's the thing, it worked. In 88, 89, and 90, Detroit didn't just beat Chicago, they bent them. The Bulls' offense shrank. Drives turned tentative. Frustration turned into skirmishes. You remember the early game melee in 88, and the moment Scottie Pippen got blown into the baseline stanchion so hard he needed stitches. It was a 3-year lab where Chicago learned the difference between highlight reels and hard realities. Why this rivalry felt like destiny, not coincidence. This wasn't just basketball. It was identity, status, validation. Isiah Thomas, Chicago-born, Detroit-made, was the hometown prodigy who never got a parade down Michigan Avenue. Jordan, North Carolina-bred, Chicago-adopted, became the city's chosen son. Imagine watching your city worship someone who isn't you while you're at the peak of your powers. That stings. There were whispers about the '85 All-Star freeze-out, whether real or urban legend. In a rivalry this spicy, you didn't need facts, you needed fuel. Both sides had plenty. Meanwhile, the Pistons took the league by force. Champs in '89, sweeping Magic's Lakers. Champs again in '90, tuning out Portland. If there was a soul to be crushed, they brought a mallet, and yet, each spring, through the smoke and sirens, you'd see number 23 getting up. Again, and again, and again. How many times can you hit a man before he stops? Detroit kept asking, Jordan kept answering. The pivot that changed everything. Chicago had to evolve. The Bulls couldn't just hand the ball to Jordan and pray he parted the Red Sea every possession. Enter Phil Jackson and Tex Winter with the triangle offense. Spacing, reads, cuts, options for everyone. It turned ball watching into ball moving. It asked Michael to trust and Scottie to ascend. And don't forget the weight room. That summer before the '91 run, Jordan said enough to the bruises. He added muscle, not to become a brawler, but to absorb the brawl. Scottie Pippen, fresh off a migraine-muddled finish the year before, came back with a surgeon's calm.
I told you, Scottie Pippen can...
Horace Grant set mean screens and clean glass. John Paxson morphed into an open corner lie detector. If you forgot him, he made you pay. The Bulls won 61 games in 1990-91, took the East's top seed, and split the regular season series with Detroit in a way that felt symbolic. We're not the same guys. 1991, the sweep that felt like an exorcism. The '91 Eastern Conference Finals weren't just revenge, they were a thesis defense. Game 1 in Chicago, the Bulls moved the ball like they had a remote control. Detroit tried the usual tactics, Chicago didn't blink. Game 2, same pressure, same poise. Jordan scored, yes, but the beauty was in the distribution. Traps turned into layups for teammates. Rotations turned into open threes. Pippen pushed pace, posted smaller guards, and played defense that looked like a shadow glued to its target. Then came Game 3 in Auburn Hills, the Pistons' house of noise. This is where the Bulls of past years melted. Not this time. They jumped Detroit early and held composure late. By Game 4, the Bad Boys were out of tricks. The Bulls won by a mile, and with seconds left on the clock, something happened that lives in rivalry lore. Pistons players, led by Isiah, walked past the Bulls bench and right into the tunnel. No handshakes, no good series, just a cold exit. Was it payback for the Bulls' harshness? An angry statement? A misread of the moment? Pick your theory. The NBA picked the screenshot. Jordan said later that finally getting through Detroit was, in some ways, more gratifying than even the title that followed. Not because the finals didn't matter, but because the Pistons had been the gatekeepers to greatness. Chicago had pushed on that door for 3 straight years. In '91, it blew off the hinges. Respect the villain and the forge. It's easy to cartoon Detroit as thugs and move on, but that's too simple, and honestly, it misses the point. The Pistons were brilliantly constructed, masterfully coached, and unafraid to be hated. Their style wasn't an accident. It was an equalizer in an era with hand checks, hard fouls, and far fewer whistles. They turned the league's prettiest offense into a wrestling match and dared you to complain. Did they cross lines? Absolutely. Did they also set a defensive standard? Also yes. 2 rings say they did something right. And it's also easy to say Jordan overcame the Bad Boys as if he simply jumped higher. He didn't. He adapted. He trusted. He expanded the edges of his greatness to include his teammates' greatness. That's the secret the highlight reels hide. The path from unstoppable scorer to unbeatable champion goes through humility and systems, not just hang time. The cultural weather around the games. Part of why this rivalry still hits is because it felt like the 80s and early 90s in stereo. Detroit's ethos, industrial, defiant, we know you don't like us, mirrored the city's fight for respect. Chicago's ascension, media savvy, shoe deals, the most famous silhouette in sports, mapped onto the NBA's push into a global spectacle. When you watched Bulls-Pistons, you weren't just watching a series, you were watching a brand war, a values war, a what is basketball supposed to look like war. Tell me that isn't why you still perk up when you see those old clips. Small moments that changed big things. There are snapshots burned into fans' heads. Jordan driving and getting stood up by 3 bodies, still hitting a leaning bank. Dumars hugging his dad after a win, the softness inside the steal. Rodman flying into the stands for a rebound like gravity was optional. Pippen, chin bandaged, refusing to flinch. Paxson, feet set in that right corner, turning air into points. And yes, the walk-off. Sportsmanship isn't a law, it's a language. Detroit chose silence. Chicago chose memory. The league chose a lesson.
Jay got a block by Jordan. Then he gets it back. Hooks, hits! Oh, man! And he's...
What the sweep unlocked. After the sweep, the Bulls ran through the finals and began a dynasty that reshaped not just the NBA, but sports marketing and culture. 6 titles in 8 years. The Pistons, meanwhile, started to fade. Attrition, age, and the simple math that every empire has an expiration date. But the arc from 88 to 90 to 91 is the story within the story. Power doesn't hand you the keys because you ask nicely. You either crack the code or you keep knocking. The Bulls cracked it. So who really won the rivalry? Detroit won the battles first and the banners early. Chicago won the war of eras. But the honest answer is that both got what they needed. The Pistons got validation that their way could conquer the world. The Bulls got a crucible that hardened them for everything to come. Without Detroit's body blows, does Chicago become the cold-blooded closer we remember? Without Chicago rising, do the Bad Boys become the myth that still sells documentaries? Rivalries are symbiotic. The villain sharpens the hero validates the villain. Strange, but true. The last word, and a question for you. When you strip away the noise, this is a tale of transformation through resistance. Detroit forced Chicago to become something better than spectacular. Chicago forced Detroit to be as precise as it was punishing, and when the torch finally passed in 1991, it wasn't gentle. It was ripped free, fingerprints and all. So you tell me, what's your defining Bulls-Pistons moment? The first time you saw the Jordan rules swallow a drive? The Pippen chin gash and 1,000-yard stare? The walk-off that still sparks arguments at cookouts? Drop it below. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of hoophead I want to kick it with. Because you don't just watch the game, you study the bruise patterns.